Hi, everybody. I am Dee Lisa, the dream doula for women, and this is what I do. I work with high level women who have difficulty remembering and interpreting their dreams that they have at night so that they can use those dreams they have at night into the vision they have for their day to day world. And today I have Kate. Please introduce yourself.
Hello there. I'm Kate Phillips with Total Wealth. I help women stop stressing about money through all kinds of ways, whether that is developing a new retirement paradigm, whether that is learning to invest, or whether that is perhaps getting out of credit card debt or simply rewriting their own money story, which is their belief systems and narrative around money.
That is, I love what you do in the world, Kate, by the way.
Thank you
And
so much, Delisa.
women, especially in our society, are kind of effed up about money. Have you found that to be true? Some, not
Yes.
everyone, some.
Yes, I think that is somewhat true. And, we hear a lot about the wage gap, but what is much larger than the wage gap is the wealth gap. So the
Mm,
wage gap is our earnings, which really, when you break that down, and I've dug into the statistics when you break down, if you're looking at comparative hours and comparative experience, the wage gap shrinks to almost nothing. Now, we know that historically that there's been a much more significant wage gap, but now, looking at now, we have a quite a narrowing gap on the wage gap, but the gender wealth gap is much larger. And I can't even find good statistics on it because depending on what the source, it varies widely. But we could be looking at 50 cents on the dollar for the wealth gap. And that is largely because women tend not to invest. Women tend to be better savers, but we're oftentimes more security oriented. And so the idea of taking risks with money, which is ironic because there's multiple studies done that show that when women do invest, they are better investors than men. Like they know how to manage the risk. They're not making generally the stupid, risks and let's sell the house and put it all on crypto or whatever. That's not how women are operating. So we can be really, really smart about money, but we get intimidated and we don't learn, and we go chasing other things in life oftentimes.
right. And often I've talked to a lot of women, and it reminds me that women are the ones who drop everything in their world to be caretakers. So if
That is
you're a woman
true.
and you have kids, you take time off to take care of the kids. Oh, who takes care of the kids when they're sick? You leave work and go take care of your kids when you're sick, or put off your vacations to do the motherly role. And then when you get older, I was talking to a woman just yesterday. She has moved to her childhood home where her brother is in hospice care. He's in his late 60s, and her mother is in her late 80s, and she's doing the other end of that. She dropped
Yes,
to take care
I
of her
did the same thing.
children. Yeah, I
I
know
I
you.
became my father's caregiver, and you're right. It is the women who are more often, and I think sometimes because, those responsibilities fall on us for all kinds of reasons, and
Mm.
also because sometimes that's what we choose. Like we want to be there for our kids or for our parents or whatever. It's like part of our values, and so that is what we do, and it does have a financial impact, which doesn't necessarily mean it's the wrong choice. Caregiving my father was not a good financial choice, but it was the right choice for me.
Yeah, and I think it was Ram Dass who wrote a book, Be Here Now,
Yeah.
and then he wrote another book called Still Here. And when
Hmm.
he was my recollection, I haven't read that book recently, but my recollection of that book is like he's thinking, how am I going to end this book still here now. Then he, I think, went to care for his elderly parent and had a stroke. Oh,
Yeah.
maybe I'm conflating that with some other story, but I think also it may have been him, it may have been someone else who said there was no greater joy or no greater honor in his life
Mm.
than to walk his father to the end of his life.
Mm. Mm.
Can't
And you're right. He did have a stroke, but he was still brilliant, still
Yeah,
making a difference in the world, even as his body, was suffering the consequences of that.
yeah, yeah. So, yes, women, and I guess if you would look, you probably have looked at this, at the number of people who are in the financial world that are helping people do investments. There aren't a lot of women doing that.
No, one of my friends, Lisa Brum, her company is my financial girlfriend, and she actually, that's like her thing in the world is not only making sure that more women are served and have good information, but also helping advisors know how to serve women because it's very much an old boys club. And some women, their experience of advisors is, the advisor talks to the husband or the male partner, and
Yeah,
like
as if they're
ignores
not even
her and
there.
doesn't, yeah, yeah, doesn't explain what's going on. And women sometimes they feel like they're not as confident even when they are as knowledgeable. They're not as confident and they
Mm.
don't feel like they can ask those basic questions. And so oftentimes they don't, like, they've got money invested, but they don't understand what it's invested in. It's just like delegate the dollars, delegate the decisions. Here, Mr. Wall Street, you take care of my money. I just don't know what to do with it. And
La la
and
la 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 la. Yeah,
and
I'll write it
sometimes years
down.
later, yeah.
Yeah, I know that you mentioned maybe in one of your emails that you were meeting with one of your clients and you were real surprised that she should have had quite a lot more money in her retirement account because she just put it there, forgot about it, or took some guy's advice and didn't watch it.
Yes, it turns out it wasn't even invested, and she didn't know that. It was basically sitting in like a money market account minus like the IRA management fees on top of it. So she had earned less than 1% per year. And it had been invested for more than a decade. She should have had an extra $100,000. I was heartbroken to see that. Um,
And no one
and
told her she didn't notice.
she didn't notice, and she probably wasn't meeting with an advisor. It was probably more, and that really gets down to habits. Like, are we checking? What's going on with your money? When's the last time you've checked in on your money? And um, she's been busy with other things, and all of a sudden she's like, I wonder what my money's doing. And she's like, gosh, it just doesn't seem like it's grown a lot. And the math just wasn't mathing. So we dug into it and finally figured out what was happening. She thought it was invested. But there's another issue with these IRAs. People hear Roth IRA or traditional IRA, like you ought to be invested in an IRA, and people put money in an IRA and they don't realize that an IRA is only a container. And until you select an investment, your money's not invested. It's sitting in a container. It's like
Mm.
it's like a bucket, but you got to put something in the bucket. You got to say, "Yes, I'd like to put some stocks in that bucket or some index funds or whatever, bonds." You got to put something in the bucket. And we just don't know what we don't know, and especially if maybe you're putting a little extra money every month or every year, and so it seems like it's growing, but then people don't really understand, like, oh, it really ought to be growing more than this, if you've got the right thing, and you got to put something in the bucket. Yeah.
Which reminds me of my grandmother was a waitress in a Chinese restaurant her whole life. And
I love it.
her investment was $100 bills under her mattress.
Interesting. She was probably a depression baby.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't gonna believe in the she I don't know if she probably had a bank account too, but I remember as a young woman, each of the grandkids got $100 bill from under her mattress. That was our whole inheritance. Here's 100, here's 100, here's 100. I'm like, thanks, Grandma.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well,
what
the
do you
banks
tell
failed.
people? Pardon me.
That was before FDIC insurance, the depression, and people lost all their money in the
Yeah, you put your
banks.
money in the bank and it might go all the way away. In
It
fact,
might just disappear.
today, is it still only insured to 100,000?
It's been insured to 250,000 since
Okay.
2008 when we had that big shakeup. But the
I'm
funny
telling you
thing,
how much I'm out of touch.
yeah, it's
So
okay.
if you
But
have 250,000 in the bank and the bank fails, you'll get 250,000 guaranteed back by the government, I guess. And after that, maybe it will go away if the bank.
yeah, well, and you could have money in different banks. That's the way to do it.
Mhm.
But I will say it's like I've dug into the FDIC insurance. Oh, did you see my eyes get big when I did that? There's about 3 cents on the dollar. Like actually, like if we had like massive bank collapses, we're just gonna say that that's not gonna happen because if it does, it's like everybody's screwed. There's
It'll be just like the depression. Tell our listeners how you got into this kind of work.
oh boy, it was really through. I spent the first half of my life prejudiced against people with money.
Mm.
I had my story about money was that it wasn't important. I was privileged to grow up in a, upper middle class family where I didn't really have to worry about money. So it's easy to say money isn't important when your needs are met.
You
And
have enough. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then I went through divorce and business failure, and all of a sudden it was like a big wake-up call. It was in my early 30s, and I thought, oh my gosh, my daughter and I are going to be, we're going to be homeless. Like I got to figure out a way to pay these bills. And I realized that money was actually important, and it was time for me to get my money stuff together. So, so that was when I got into real estate, which was when I met you. I tripled my income in a year. And a few years later, I thought, I'm making a lot more money, but I've got the same habits. The old habit when I waited tables was whatever money came in, I spent it. Like I wasn't in a bunch of debt or anything. I just money came in and it got spent. And then I tripled my income and money came in and it got spent. It was the same habit. And I just realized it's like I got to make a change. Started really working on my relationship with money, started studying about investments, started buying rental homes, and then started teaching other women around about investing. Had a huge hiccup in what I call the not so great recession of 2008 because I bought two properties at the top of the market in 2007. So, in about 18 months, all of my properties were underwater. They weren't worth what I owed on them. Ended up, that was when I started caregiving my father, went through foreclosure, was shamed myself out of my calling. I was like, nobody wants to take advice from a woman in foreclosure. So I pivoted. I knew at that point that I really was interested in finances. I've always been kind of a numbers geek, and all of a sudden I was like a money geek, and I became a financial writer for the next 12, 13 years. And I supported other, financial thought leaders, advisors, and growing their businesses, learned a whole lot more about money and investments at the time. And then a few years ago, decided it was time for me to get back to my own calling of and actually in 2020, I started investing for myself and I earned enough money to leave that writing position. So I can definitely say that investing changed my life.
That's so cool. And you can say that, yeah, you've been down in that place. And maybe, probably some people listening to this will be saying, well, I don't have money to invest. In fact, I'm so poor. I owe so much money and I feel so bad about it. How did you get out of feeling, you just said, I shamed myself. How did you get out of that?
Yeah. Boy, I remember I had to go back to like the fundamentals of what I had been teaching. I had been teaching of how important our mindset is. I know you are an amazing coach and you work with people on their vision and on their mindset and on their energy. And I realized it's like I have to go back to like gratitude, taking walks, self-care, just like the basics. I had to reclaim my own power. And it was actually like a really transformational time because I had to unhook my self-worth from my circumstances
Mm,
because I was not feeling good about myself because my circumstances were, pointing to, oh, I might have a big L on my head, like loser.
loser, loser.
And I just had to kind of go, no, I'm still the same person. Matter of fact, I'm probably smarter than I was before I hit all of this. I probably have more compassion to other people. I probably, have like I'm older and wiser and more experienced. I certainly understood things about market cycles that I had previously understood on paper or in my head. But when you live through something, you're like, oh, this is why I have to pay attention to market cycles.
Yeah.
So I just went back to the basics and and financially when you're in that position, like investing is not the thing to do. Like there's always a right step to take at the moment. And the right step to take might be gratitude and, taking walks and self-care. The right step to take might be, um, getting out of high interest credit card debt. The right step to take might be building an emergency fund or working on, s- steadying your income. So investing is really, it's not one of the first steps that we take at all as women. Like we do have to put these foundational pieces in place first. And sometimes we cycle in and out, of those because after I invested and made a bunch of money and left my steady bread and butter work, then I was like, oh, I need to focus on, creating income. Like I need to stop, checking the stock market 3 times a day, put my focus somewhere else. So there's always a step to take to empower ourselves.
I love what you said that circumstances were in one place, but your mindset was what you worked on. And I talk about that all day long with people that I help. Is that there's the truth and there's the circumstances, and
Yeah.
you can say the circumstances as if it's true, like I'm broke or I'm bankrupt or this isn't working. And it's like, oh, what seems to be happening in your life might just be an illusion, because we are far greater than anything, any circumstance, situation, or condition in our life. We are greater than that. And I think part of
Ah,
what people forget about,
yes.
that you and I both teach, is that yes, you are greater than that. You are more powerful than that. And you can figure out what to do in this situation or circumstance or condition in your life. And some people say that that's the whole pleasure of life, is that wouldn't life be boring? Although we all think, I'd like that kind of boring. Wouldn't life be boring if we were just uber rich and we had anything we wanted any day? What would be the pleasure of that? Well, it would be comfortable and fun, or would it? And then getting out of some particular jam we're in, the struggle of that, and looking back and going, oh man, I made that happen. That's kind of the juice of life.
It is, it is. Every affluent family's biggest fear for their children as their children grow up, their biggest fear is that they're going to have trust fund babies that are
Yeah.
just that literally delegate their power to that trust fund, to that, big portfolio balance or the inheritance, and they don't go find their own the thing that they are meant to do. That's actually usually the one of the biggest fears of affluent parents. And when I was in that situation of, going through my own foreclosure, it really, like, I had to pull this deep power out of myself. I found perfect rental home. And then I had to go convince here I was, like, I had some of the worst credit I had ever seen. So it had been like a year of just, financial disaster. And I went through my own health struggle while I was supporting my dad. So I realized finally I was undiagnosed, what's it called when you're low iron, had trouble like getting out of bed, which is not a good recipe. Um, and so I had to go, like, convince a landlord to rent to me, and I had to believe that I was gonna be the best tenant ever in order to convince her to rent her home to me, and I did. You know, I did. I had to believe in myself first,
Mm.
and then I had to get other people to believe in me, whether I wanted them to hire me or rent me their house or, whatever it was. I had to believe in myself first. And that was actually one of the big things that I learned, is that when our circumstances look so crappy, like, that might be the next step, is not only steeping ourselves in gratitude so we can shift our energy and shift our focus on the things that we do have, on the things that are working, on the blessings that, are all around us, even when we don't notice them. But then, shifting our identity so that we are creating what we want rather than just being a reflection, like reflecting our identity based on like our fears of not enough, not having enough, not being enough.
I have heard that about wealthy people, and I've read several stories about how so and so plan to give their children zero money for and spend it all so that their children aren't trust fund babies. And I used to date a guy who was wealthy, and then he was poor, and then he was wealthy again.
Mhm.
Um, and he had cousins who he disdainly talked about as those trust fund babies. They're a waste of breath,
Wow. Hmm.
waste of breath.
That's a little harsh.
I think what he meant was, and he was resentful because he wasn't at the time a trust fund baby. It came and went in his life.
Mhm.
But he saw his cousins basically drifting and dreaming through life and not having careers or even hobbies that were satisfying to them. They were
Mm.
just unhappy, but they had all the pretty things.
Yeah. Well, have you ever seen children, like young children, at a Christmas or a birthday, and they have all these presents and they get really excited about the first present that they unwrap. And the next present, they're a little less excited. And by the time they get to the 15th, the 20th present, it's like they're overwhelmed, they're bored, uh, like, more is not always better. We have it in society that more is better, and I think it's just not true. I think financially, maybe one of the reasons why we might want more is, it allows us to give, or it allows us to support the things that we're excited about. But, just like a life of consumerism where we have endless money to go consume. I used to love to just, when I was younger, go to the mall as just a hobby, like go to the mall and go shopping. And finally, I realized how agitated I would feel if I did too much shopping. Like, it just made me agitated. But if I went for a 2 hour hike in the woods, it's like, oh, now I feel amazing and peaceful. And so I started just questioning this whole consumer culture. Like we can actually have it be that money is important, recognizing that having wealth is not the same thing as buying into this consumer culture that might actually skew our principles or our priorities. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, I know a lot of young people who would rather have experiences than things.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
the new youth. They're like, I want to go on the trip. I want to go on the retreat. I want to have the super healthy food. Maybe I'll buy some clothes, but they have to be ethically sourced. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So when you
And
sit down, go ahead.
there's a secret to that because all of the, yeah, like, my daughter's in that, like experiences, not um not stuff, which is great. And I had a client and she was a little older, like getting, closer. She was hoping to be able to maybe retire in 10 years. And she was always going on trips, couldn't say no to any opportunity. And some advice that I gave her that I've given other people as well is think about saying yes to some of those opportunities. You want to reward the woman you are today with something that's fun, and then think about also investing maybe an equal amount for the woman you are going to be, for the woman that you are becoming, because 10, 20 years from now you're going to want to go on trips then too. And are you putting something away? Are you growing something for that future woman that you are becoming? And she did I think make some changes and was able to retire. And I see on her Facebook page that she's still, taking adventures, and, maybe not as many as she was, but she's still just loving life. And so she put away a little extra for the woman she was going to be someday.
Wow, that's so cool, Kate. So I know that you teach courses and have workshops and have communities, but if you gave somebody, before we get into that, if you gave somebody one book to read about money and it was to a woman, what would be your top two or three books today?
Mm. If I'm seeing if I have one of these, sometimes I have like a book handy. Not sure I've got it within reach. I did for a while. If she was an entrepreneur, I love Rachel Rogers' We Should All Be Millionaires. For business owners, it is a book about money, but it's very much aimed towards people who are entrepreneurs. Love that book. We Should All Be Millionaires from Rachel Rogers, especially written to and for women and uh, women of color, people who, for various reasons, maybe how they identify, gender wise, or, that they have not been you know, in the wealthy club so much in the
Right.
past. That's a great book for that. Oh, that's funny. I do have this book handy, but it's the old version of it. Dickie Robin wrote a book, Your Money or Your Life. Uh,
I remember reading that book and it blew my mind.
that is a classic, and she really relates time to money and how important our time is and our life energy, and that the money that we spend represents the life energy that we spent earning that money. Um, she did update that book a few years ago because really the investment strategies have very much changed. The original version is honestly not particularly relevant anymore.
Mhm.
Um, there's one point that I would differ from her in that, you know, the book really aims to create the financial freedom so you can do anything you want to with your time. And there are a lot of people who are like, I'm gonna get there when I'm 98 years old. I'm going to be able to live for 6 months on my retirement income, and in the manner to which I've become accustomed. And and so I don't think it should be either or. Yes, we should be you know, building assets, building cash flow for eventual financial freedom. But for a lot of people, the typical retirement paradigm has just sort of failed.
Mhm.
And, if we didn't work corporate jobs, if we didn't max out our 401ks, if we, stopped to caregive our parents for a few years, or we went through an expensive, ugly divorce, or had, some cancer treatment or something that, bankrupted us. There's all kinds of reasons why people are not on track, that they don't have what they hoped or thought that they would have. And in that case, they ought to do what you and I are doing and finding work that we can do for the rest of our lives. Where we just love the work that we do, and whether you've got 1 million or 5 million in the bank, or whether you're like, I don't know if I'm ever going to retire, like that's good advice for anybody at any level, is to find something you love to do with your time that you can also, you're contributing to the world, and you're receiving, hope you're receiving money in response. You don't have to receive money in response. If you're financially solid, you can go and do volunteer, but I know of people who prefer, to have a business, that they actually feel like that's a better, deeper way for them to contribute to the world, even if they're multi-millionaires. So it's I I just think that we're sold this dream of leisure, that someday, when I see somebody post something like, I can't wait to retire so I can enjoy life, I think to myself, you're doing life wrong if you're waiting to retire so that you can enjoy life. How
Oh,
can
100%.
we reframe that?
100%. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, where when I was a kid, and this is dating me, Boeing was the main employer.
Yeah.
And people who worked for Boeing, men usually, when they retired, they lived for about 3 to 5 years. So all their life, they're saving for retirement, waiting for retirement. When they retire, they're really going to go have fun, get the RV, go on the trips with their wife. And the statistic, the statistic that they die soon after they retire was so shocking and so sad to me. It's like, okay, don't wait till you retire to enjoy your life. And also, when you think about trading time for money, do you know what I mean? Like some people trade time for money, some people trade wisdom for money. And it's not like
Mm,
how many hours I spent with you, that's what I make. Or you go to the job that pays you so much an hour, you're
mhm.
maxed out at whatever that hourly or yearly rate is. But if you are exchanging your knowledge for money, that seems like it could exponentially gift you more wealth.
Yes, you're really, what you're talking about here is leverage. How do we leverage? There's all kinds of assets. There's financial assets. You can have a portfolio or a savings account or a home. There's all kinds of ways to leverage homes. It's an amazing asset. But we also can have wisdom. You can have this one is an arm's reach. I have a book that I co-wrote with Kim Butler, Perpetual Wealth. It is about generational wealth. And I still get that book, still generates thousands of dollars every year in royalties, even though we
Mhm.
published it years ago. We split the royalties. I'm looking forward to, publishing, right, finishing and publishing my next book, because that can be like whether it's a YouTube channel that you grow and monetize, whether it is books that you write, whether it's courses or other, like there's all kinds of ways to share wisdom where we're not necessarily trading time for it. I mean, other than occasionally mentioning that book on a Zoom call or on a maybe on a video, like I don't do anything for that book, but I still get quarterly checks, royalty checks. So, we can leverage our wisdom, our experience. People can sometimes even, uh, earn 10% of a company, or the profits of a company through sharing their experience, and like be owner of a company without even having to make a financial investment in it.
Right. Oh, that's so beautiful. Well, tell the listeners how they can find you and how they can work with you if they want to know more about becoming financially smart as a woman. Or do you also work with men?
I do. I do work with men right now. The programs that I'm selling are women 2 of my 3 programs right now are women focused. I might shift that. I think the next time right now I'm launching Wealth School for Women. We're just starting, but I don't know. I already have like my intuitive hunch that the next time I do Wealth School that it will also be open to men. Um, so people can find me on I'm very active on Facebook, the Kate Phillips, accept no substitutes. I've got a group on Facebook, Total Wealth Creators. I've got a show on YouTube, the Total Wealth Show, although somebody else has a Total Wealth channel that apparently is a lot more popular than mine. It's a little hard to find. I'll have to give you some links. When we publish this on YouTube, I can come in and drop some links, or I can hand them over to you.
Yeah,
But
we'll put all the ways to find Kate in the show
yeah, those are all the ways to find me. I can be
including a
emailed.
link to the book.
Yes, yes, yes. I
Yeah.
can be emailed at Kate at Total Wealth Coaching. If you want to get on my email list. I'm sending out like to send out helpful information on a regular basis. And yeah, I've got I'm launching Wealth School for Women. I've got a program also for people who are getting out of debt. It's called the Debt Cure. And then I also have a women's community. It's the Wealth Alignment Circle. I know you know about that, where we meet a couple times a month. That's not centered around finance. That's really centered around personal growth that creates financial growth. We're working on our identity and on our belief systems and our environment and our self-worth and, our intentions and all of those things. And then we just mastermind a couple of times a month. So that's a time when people can come in and get some coaching. And that wasn't originally marketed to women, but it just so happened that only women joined. And then I felt the call and the pull to start integrating like a little bit of music, a little bit of movement and dance, and it just felt like it belonged in
Yeah.
the community
Yeah.
of women.
It's so great, Kate. And before I log off with you, Kate's also a musician. And so it's really fun to go into her online classes because she plays music. She's been inspired by the topic. And she invites you to stand up and move your body. So all of us who've been on like Zoom with fatigue, and we're sitting in our chairs and we get up and our hips kind of stuck. Not how you do it with Kate. No, she makes you get up and dance around or invites you to, and it's fun. You make it really fun.
It is. It's fun, and it's a shift of energy.
Yeah.
The when especially when we talk about money, sometimes we will physically contract, especially if you've
Mhm.
had money traumas, money wounds. Many of us, most of us probably have. And so to even change how we think and feel about money, the conversations can be part of it, but it also really helps to move our body, have a little groove, going on, because it helps us shift that energy around the topic. And if we've been doing some learning, I think it helps just kind of sink it into the cells of our bodies. Yeah. I know you work with energy as well. It's really important. Mindset and energy, we create everything from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, we could go on forever, but thank you for being on the podcast. I will look forward to talking to you again, maybe about a specific item that we can help women with.
Maybe. Thank you so much. It's been a joy.
Thank you for being here.